Now, today we're going to listen to a story called The Shoemaker and the Elves. The characters in this story are a shoemaker and his wife. Remember, characters are people that a story is about. There's also some secret magical characters in this story. Listen to The Shoemaker and the Elves and see if you can guess who the magical characters can be. Evening, a few days before Christmas, the shoemaker had an idea. As he sat in front of the fire, he told his wife his idea. My friends, what do you think he could be thinking? We should stay up late at night and try to discover and find out who is making those beautiful shoes, he said as the firelight flickered across his face. The shoemaker's wife agreed, so they stayed awake and hid behind a curtain. As the clock struck midnight, the shoemaker and his wife saw two tiny elves dressed in tattered clothes entering their workshop. My friends, an elf is a small magical helper that is make believe. They're pretend. In this story, we see two elves. In the blink of an eye, they had scampered up onto the workbench. They picked up the cut leather and they began to sew it together with magic. Before the sun had come back up, they were finished sewing the shoes. They placed them carefully on the workbench and then they disappeared as quickly as they came. The elves ran out into the cold, dark night with only their clothes to keep them warm. The shoemaker's wife was worried about the elves. "I want to make them some nice warm clothes," she said to her husband as they ate breakfast. "Perhaps you can make them some tiny leather shoes to protect their feet from the cold." The shoemaker and his wife set to work cutting and sewing the tiny clothes and shoes. That evening, after her husband had laid out the shoe, the shoemaker's wife placed the gifts on the bench. The tiny clothes and leather shoes looked beautiful in the lamplight. Remember, we learned the word tiny means small. The elves are tiny, just like Baby Bear. Once again, the shoemaker and his wife hid behind the curtain. Let's see what they'll find. At the stroke of midnight, the elves appeared. They were just about to begin their work when they noticed the gifts spread out before them. They put on their new clothes and shoes and admired each other. They thought they looked good in their new clothes. Then, as quickly as they came, they were gone. The elves never came back again, but it did not matter. The shoemaker and his wife were no longer poor. They lived happily together for the rest of their lives. The end. My friends, where did the shoemaker make his shoes? He made his shoes on his workbench in his workshop. Good job. One morning, the shoemaker and his wife were surprised to find shoes that were finished on the workbench. Who had made these shoes? Good job. There were two tiny magical elves that made the shoes every night before they woke up. The shoemaker and his wife Watch the elves make the shoes and then go out into the cold, dark night. Why was the shoemaker's wife worried about the elves? She was worried that the elves would be cold at night because they don't have on shoes and their clothes are a little bit raggedy and tethered. How did the shoemaker and his wife help the elves? The shoemaker made shoes for the elves, and his wife made tiny clothes. Good job, friends. Let's continue reading tomorrow.